On the dark and mysterious planet of Alaris, where the red moons never set and silver towers touched the clouds, lived a queen whose name was whispered in fear, Ariana, the alien vampire queen. She was a vision of beauty and power, her pale skin glowing softly under the crystal lights of her palace, and her golden crown shining like fire against the night. Her people bowed to her strength, but behind their reverence hid fear. None dared to come close. They said her heart was cursed, that anyone who tried to love her would face a fate worse than death. Every year the royal palace held the bonding ceremony, a grand night when warriors and nobles chose their life partners under the gaze of the twin moons. Music filled the air, the sound of golden bells mixed with laughter and whispered promises. The hall was alive with colors, shimmering gowns, glistening armor, and the scent of rare alien flowers. Everyone in the court found a partner that night, everyone except the queen. Ariana stood upon her throne, watching as pair after pair joined hands and sealed their bond. Her eyes, glowing faintly red, softened for a moment, but no one noticed. No one dared to look at her for long. She was untouchable, distant like the stars above their world. When the last song faded and the couples began to leave, silence filled the grand hall. The candles flickered, their flames trembling as if afraid of her sadness. She stood alone, the ruler of all, yet lonelier than anyone on Alaris. She walked down the steps of her throne, her long gown sweeping across the floor like flowing moonlight. Her golden heels clicked softly, echoing through the empty hall. The mirrors along the walls reflected her face, flawless, perfect, yet empty. She stopped near one of the great windows, staring out at the endless night sky. Her reflection looked back at her, but she barely recognized the woman she had become. "They all found love," she whispered softly, "and I remain cursed." Just then the grand doors creaked open. The guards, confused, turned toward the sound. No one ever entered without permission, especially not at this hour. A strange figure stepped inside, tall, calm, and different from anyone they had ever seen. His skin was sun-touched, his hair dark, and his eyes full of quiet curiosity. The guards raised their weapons, but the queen lifted her hand slightly, signaling them to stand down. A ripple of whispers spread across the hall. "A human here?" one guard muttered in disbelief. No human had ever been allowed inside the royal palace, not since the war between their worlds. Yet here he was, walking boldly across the sacred floor as if he belonged there. His name was Ethan. Ariana's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in fascination. Humans were known to be weak, fragile, and ordinary. Yet something about him felt different. His movements were steady, his gaze unafraid. When he finally reached the center of the hall, he looked up and met her eyes. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. The air between them thickened, heavy with something neither could name. Ariana felt her heart, the one that had been silent for centuries, give a faint, trembling beat. The sensation startled her. She hadn't felt that in years. Ethan bowed slightly, not out of fear, but out of respect. His voice was calm, deep, and strangely warm. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "I've come a long way to see you." The queen tilted her head. "You are brave," she replied, "or perhaps foolish." "Do you know who I am?" He smiled, not the nervous smile of a man before power, but one full of quiet truth. "I know exactly who you are," he said, "the queen who stands alone while her people dance." Her breath caught for a second. No one had ever dared speak to her that way. No one had ever looked at her with such understanding. She searched his eyes for mockery or fear, but found none, only honesty. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. They couldn't understand what was happening. Why wasn't the queen angry? Why hadn't she ordered his arrest? But Ariana didn't care. For the first time, she wanted to listen. "Why have you come here, human?" she asked softly, stepping closer. Her voice, usually cold and commanding, now carried a trace of curiosity. "To see the truth," he said simply. "The stories told about you. They can't all be true." Ariana smiled faintly, though her eyes still held pain. "And what if they are?" "Then I'll decide for myself," he replied, his gaze steady. "Because sometimes what people fear most is what they don't understand." Her lips parted slightly. Those words echoed inside her mind like music. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't trembling or bowing like the others. He was just looking at her as if she were something human too. Outside, thunder rolled softly and moonlight streamed through the glass, painting their faces in silver light. For a heartbeat, it felt like the entire universe had gone silent. waiting to see what would happen next. The queen's heart beat again, louder this time. The curse that chained her emotions began to tremble, faintly, dangerously. Her eyes glowed brighter as she whispered under her breath, "Why is a human here? And why is he not afraid of me?" And in that single question, a story began, one that would shake the stars and change the fate of both their worlds forever. The hall remained silent long after the queen's whisper faded into the air. The guard stood still, unsure whether to speak or breathe. The human Ethan was the only one who seemed calm, almost as if he had expected this meeting all along. Queen Ariana stepped down from her throne, her golden gown glimmering with every movement. The sharp echo of her heels filled the room as she slowly approached him. Her red eyes, glowing faintly under the moonlight, studied him carefully. She had faced armies, defeated traitors, and survived curses, but never had she seen a man stand before her without fear. "Do you not fear death, human?" she asked softly, her voice echoing like a melody in the grand hall. Ethan smiled, a calm, gentle smile that reached his eyes. "No, my queen," he said quietly. "I fear living without truth more than I fear dying for it." Her lips curved slightly, though she tried to hide it. His words touched something deep inside her, a place she thought had long died. The guards shifted nervously. One of them stepped forward. "Your Majesty, this is dangerous. Humans cannot be trusted." But Ariana raised her hand and the guard froze. Her eyes never left Ethan. "Leave us," she commanded. The guards hesitated, glancing at each other, but her tone allowed no argument. Slowly they bowed and left the hall, their armor clinking softly until the great doors shut behind them. Now it was just the queen and the human. For a long moment, neither spoke. The faint light from the twin moons spilled through the windows, wrapping the room in a quiet glow. The air between them felt alive, filled with something that neither could explain. "You are very bold to come here," Ariana finally said, walking closer until she stood only a few steps away from him. "You walk into the home of monsters, and yet you stand tall." Ethan looked around at the grand walls, the crystal chandeliers, the symbols carved in gold. "If this is the home of monsters," he said softly, "then I think the world has lied about what monsters look like." Her heart trembled. For years she had been called a creature of darkness and a cursed queen, a being without a soul. But this human spoke to her as if she were still alive inside. She turned away, hiding the confusion in her eyes. "Humans and my kind are enemies," she said. "You should not be here. If they find you, they'll kill you." Ethan stepped closer, his voice calm. "Then let them try. I didn't come here to fight. I came to understand." She looked back at him, curious. "Understand what?" "You," he replied simply. "The queen who rules the night but looks like she's waiting for dawn." For a second, she forgot to breathe. No one had ever spoken to her like that, so gently, so honestly. Her throat tightened, and she turned her face slightly, hiding the faint shimmer in her eyes. Outside, thunder rolled across the skies of Alaris, followed by a streak of blue lightning. It illuminated the hall for an instant, casting their shadows on the walls, his standing tall, hers elegant and proud beside him. "Why do you care?" she whispered. "What do you want from me, human?" Ethan looked at her quietly for a moment. "Nothing," he said. "Sometimes caring doesn't need a reason." Her heart beat faster. That feeling again, the one she didn't understand. It scared her, yet drew her closer to him. "Your name," she said after a pause. "Tell me your name." "Ethan," he answered with a soft smile. "And yours, my queen?" "Ariana," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "But my people call me something else." "What do they call you?" "The Cursed One," she said quietly. "They believe my love brings death." Ethan's gaze softened. Then maybe they never knew what real love could survive. Her eyes widened slightly at his words. For a brief second, she saw something pure in him, something her world had forgotten long ago. Then suddenly a sharp sound broke the silence. The door at the far end of the hall creaked open again. A servant rushed in, breathless and afraid. "Your Majesty, forgive me, the council demands your presence. They have seen the human." Ariana's expression changed instantly. The warmth in her eyes vanished, replaced by cold command. "Tell them I will deal with this myself." The servant bowed and hurried away. When the door closed again, Ariana turned back to Ethan, her voice low and serious. You shouldn't have come here, she said, though her tone carried sadness more than anger. They will see you as a threat. Ethan nodded slowly. Maybe I am, he said softly. A threat to their lies. For a moment her lips twitched into a faint smile, but it quickly faded. Stay hidden in the East Garden tonight, she said. No one dares go there after dark. I will send food. He looked at her, his eyes full of quiet gratitude. Why are you helping me? Ariana hesitated. Her gaze lingered on his face, and a human face that showed no fear, only kindness. I don't know, she whispered. Maybe because for the first time in a long time, someone looked at me and didn't see a monster. Their eyes met again, her red against his brown. And for a moment, the air between them felt like fire and rain. Then she turned away before her heart could betray her further. Go now, she said softly, before I change my mind. Ethan nodded, taking one last look at her before disappearing into the shadows beyond the hall. When he was gone, Ariana stood there, silent and still. Her fingers brushed the edge of her crown as if it suddenly felt too heavy. She looked toward the window where moonlight poured in and whispered to herself, What are you doing, Ariana? Her heart gave another quiet, forbidden beat, one that refused to die. Outside, in the garden, the human disappeared into the darkness, unaware that powerful eyes were already watching him from afar. The game had begun. The night on Alaris was quiet, painted in shades of blue and silver. The palace stood tall under the twin moons, its towers glowing faintly like distant stars. Somewhere in the East Garden, hidden among the marble statues and glowing flowers, the human named Ethan waited. The air was cool, and every rustle of leaves reminded him that he was far from home, a stranger in a world that did not want him. From the balcony above, Queen Ariana watched silently. Her eyes followed the small flicker of light below where Ethan had built a faint fire to stay warm. She didn't know why she was drawn to him. Maybe it was his courage, or maybe it was the way he looked at her. Not as a queen, not as a monster, but as a woman. She told herself it was dangerous, that she was foolish to care. But every time she tried to look away, her heart whispered otherwise. Finally, unable to resist, she descended from her chambers, her golden cloak flowing behind her like liquid light. The guards were asleep. The corridors were empty. She moved silently through the shadows until she reached the garden. Ethan looked up as soon as he heard the soft sound of her steps. When he saw her, his eyes softened. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. If someone sees you, she raised her hand, silencing him. This is my palace, she said with a faint smile. I can go wherever I wish. He smiled in return. Then I'm honored you came to see me. Ariana sat beside him on the stone bench, her eyes catching the reflection of the moonlight. The garden was filled with strange alien flowers that glowed faintly in the dark, spreading soft light around them. It was peaceful, almost like the world had forgotten its hate for a moment. Ethan looked around in wonder. Your world is beautiful, he said softly. It feels alive, like it's breathing. Ariana looked at him curiously. On your planet, is it different? He nodded. Our skies are blue. Our nights are dark. We don't have magic like yours, just hearts that break easily. Her gaze lingered on his face. And yet, she whispered, your heart doesn't seem afraid. He looked into her eyes. Fear only matters if you have something to lose. She turned her head slightly, hiding the tiny smile that formed on her lips. His words were simple, but they struck deep. She had everything, power, riches, immortality. Yet somehow she felt he had something she didn't. Freedom. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the faint hum of the night. Then Ethan spoke again. You said your heart is cursed. What does that mean? Ariana's expression darkened. Many years ago I loved someone, she said quietly. A warrior from my own kind. He betrayed me, and in anger I cursed him. But the spell turned back on me. Since then, anyone who has tried to love me dies. Ethan's eyes softened. I'm sorry. You should be afraid, she said softly. Even being near me is dangerous, he shook his head. Maybe, but loneliness is more dangerous, don't you think? Her eyes widened slightly, and for a heartbeat she forgot how to breathe. She wanted to speak, but no words came. Instead, she simply looked at him, this strange, stubborn human who spoke with truth instead of fear. Then he said something that made her heart tremble. Even queens need someone to understand them. For the first time in years, Ariana laughed. A soft, honest laugh that echoed through the garden like music. Ethan smiled at the sound, his heart warming at the sight of her happiness. The Queen shook her head slightly. "You are strange, human." "I'll take that as a compliment," he replied. Their laughter faded into a soft silence, a silence that was not empty, but filled with something fragile and new. The distance between them felt smaller now, as if the walls of their worlds had begun to crack, but high above, hidden among the towers, a pair of red eyes watched them through the shadows. It was General Kyle, Ariana's most loyal guard, and the one who feared her downfall the most. His jaw tightened as he saw the Queen sitting with the human. "This cannot continue," he muttered to himself. "If she falls for him, she will destroy us all." The next morning, the whispers began. Servants spoke of seeing the Queen in the garden at midnight. The council grew uneasy. "She risks everything," one elder hissed. "The prophecy warned us, love with a human will bring chaos." Ariana ignored them all. She continued meeting Ethan in secret, sometimes in the garden, sometimes by the ancient library, sometimes near the glowing river that ran through the palace grounds. They talked for hours, about stars, about dreams, about the lives they wished they had. One night, as they sat beneath the glowing trees, Ethan looked at her and said, "Maybe your curse isn't real. Maybe it's just fear holding you prisoner." Ariana looked at him sadly. If only that were true. He reached out gently, his fingers brushing against hers. For a second she froze. Her heart raced wildly, the red glow in her eyes flickering. But nothing happened. No pain, no curse. Only warmth, and soft and steady. She looked at him in shock. "You touched me," she whispered. "And you're still alive," Ethan smiled softly. "Maybe love doesn't obey curses." Her lips parted, and for the first time she felt hope. Small, dangerous, but real. She didn't pull her hand away. The garden light shimmered brighter as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then suddenly a sharp sound broke the peace. A faint metallic click. Ethan froze. Ariana's senses sharpened instantly. From the shadows behind the trees, a blade flashed. An assassin stepped out, his eyes burning red with fury. "The Queen cannot love a human," he shouted and lunged forward. Ariana turned, her power flaring like fire. The assassin's blade stopped midair, caught in an invisible force. Her voice thundered through the garden, powerful and cold. "No one touches him." The assassin fell to the ground, his weapon clattering beside him. Ariana's chest rose and fell as she tried to calm herself. She turned to Ethan, his eyes wide with shock. "Now you see," she whispered, trembling slightly. "Even love brings blood in my world." Ethan stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "Then let's see whose world changes first, yours or mine." Her red eyes met his, and the night seemed to hold its breath once more, but above them, unseen. The council watched through crystal mirrors, their expressions cold and full of fear. The prophecy had begun to unfold. The sun rose slowly over the silver towers of Alaris, casting a pale glow across the palace walls. The storm from the night before had passed, but inside the Queen's heart, a new one had begun to form. All night, she had replayed the moment. The flash of the blade, the assassin's voice. The fire of her own power when she saved Ethan. She had revealed too much. Too openly. Too soon. Now the palace was restless. Whispers filled the corridors like smoke. Servants avoided her gaze. Guards spoke in low voices when she passed. Everyone knew something had happened in the East Garden. Something forbidden. In her chamber, Queen Ariana stood before a mirror, her reflection pale and distant. The pearls around her neck glowed softly, but her eyes looked tired. She touched her chest where her heart still beat faster than usual, the same rhythm it found every time she thought of Ethan. The door creaked open, and General Kyle entered, bowing deeply. His golden armor gleamed under the morning light, but his eyes were cold. "My queen," he said sternly. "The council demands answers. They know the human lives. They know you protected him." Ariana turned slowly, her voice calm but sharp. "I do not answer to their fear." Kyle hesitated. "You risk everything, your throne, your people, your life, for a creature that does not belong here." She walked toward him, her eyes glowing faintly red. "And yet that creature has shown me more kindness than anyone in this palace." He clenched his fists. Kindness cannot save you from a curse. Her voice lowered softer now. Maybe kindness is the only thing that can. Kale looked away, frustration burning in his eyes. You are blinded by emotion, Ariana. The prophecy said, Enough! She snapped, her power shaking the air. I am the prophecy's queen, not its prisoner. He bowed his head, but his voice trembled with warning. The council will not stop my queen, they will strike at him. To control you. Ariana froze. The image of Ethan's smile flashed in her mind. The warmth in his voice, the courage in his eyes. She couldn't let them touch him. That night, when darkness fell again, she moved through the hidden halls of the palace cloaked in black. She knew where they had taken Ethan. He was imprisoned in the old dungeons deep beneath the crystal floor, a place built to silence traitors and ghosts. 2 guards stood outside the iron doors. Ariana stepped from the shadows, her eyes blazing. Leave, she ordered. The guards hesitated, trembling. My queen, do you wish to test me? She said coldly. The torches flickered as the temperature dropped, her power filling the air. The guards quickly bowed and vanished. Inside the cell, Ethan sat against the wall, chains around his wrists, blood on his sleeve. His eyes lifted when she entered, and a faint smile touched his lips. I was starting to think you'd forgotten me, he said quietly. Her chest tightened at the sight of him, bruised but still unbroken. She knelt beside him, her fingers trembling as she touched the metal around his wrists. The chains melted away with a hiss of smoke. Who did this? She asked, her voice low and dangerous. The council, he whispered. They said a human cannot stay alive in the queen's palace. They called me your weakness. Ariana's heart ached, but her anger burned stronger. You are not my weakness, she said. You are the first truth I've found. He looked at her gently. Then why do you look so sad? She turned her face away. Because I know what they'll do next. Ethan reached out, brushing his fingers against her cheek. Then let me go. Don't destroy yourself for me. Her eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. You don't understand. I have faced death, betrayal, and darkness, but losing you, that would be worse, he smiled softly. Then I'll help you fight, whatever comes. For a long moment they sat in silence, their hands still touching, their hearts speaking what words could not. Suddenly the ground trembled. A deep, rumbling sound shook the walls. From above, the echo of boots and shouts filled the corridors. Ariana's head snapped up. They've come. The heavy door burst open and soldiers flooded in, led by Kale himself. His face was torn between loyalty and pain. Forgive me, my queen, he said. They forced my hand. Ethan stood protectively in front of her, but the soldiers surrounded them. Ariana's eyes glowed brighter, her power swirling in red light. If you touch him, I will destroy this palace, she warned. Kale's voice trembled. Then the prophecy will come true. Love will bring our ruin. Maybe ruin is the only way to find freedom, she whispered. Energy crackled in the air. The soldiers stepped back, shielding their eyes as a burst of crimson light filled the dungeon. When it faded, the cell was empty. Both the queen and the human were gone. They had vanished into the night. Far away in the ancient forest beyond the palace walls, Ariana collapsed in exhaustion. Ethan caught her before she fell. Her skin was cold, her power nearly drained. You shouldn't have done that, he whispered. She looked up at him weakly. I told you before. I don't regret saving what's real. He held her close, the wind howling through the dark trees around them. Above, the moons glowed red, as if the heavens themselves were watching their forbidden love. In the palace, Kale stood at the broken doorway, his eyes full of sorrow. Forgive me, my queen, he murmured. You've chosen your path, and now blood will follow. And deep within the shadows of Alaris, the council prepared for war. The forest was silent, bathed in red moonlight. The trees of Alaris stood tall and glowing faintly, their crystal-like branches humming softly with power. Deep within that forest, far from the palace and its chaos, Queen Ariana rested against a stone wall, her breath weak but steady. The escape had drained almost all of her strength. Ethan knelt beside her, his hand trembling slightly as he pressed a cloth against a wound on her arm. It wasn't deep, but it hurt him to see her in pain. You need to rest, he said softly. Her eyes opened slowly, glowing faintly red under the pale light. Queens do not rest, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Even queens need to heal. For the first time, she didn't argue. her head tilted slightly, resting against his shoulder. The quiet of the forest surrounded them, and for a brief moment, they both forgot the danger that hunted them. But peace never lasted long on Alaris. Far away, in the crystal tower of the palace, the High Council gathered. Their faces were pale and furious. Kyle stood before them, his armor still marked with dust and blood. "She has fled," he said in a low voice. "The queen is gone." "With the human." The elder counselor slammed his fist against the table. "Then she has betrayed us. The prophecy is clear. Love with a human will bring ruin." Kale's voice cracked. "She is still our queen." "Not anymore," the elder hissed. "She is the enemy now. Find the human, kill him. Without him, the curse will break her spirit." Kale's jaw tightened. He didn't answer, but deep inside, guilt burned. He had sworn to protect her, not destroy her. That night, as Ariana slept in the forest cave, Ethan watched the flames of a small fire flicker across her face. Even in rest, she looked strong, a queen even in silence. He couldn't understand how someone so powerful could look so fragile, too. When she stirred, he whispered, "Ariana?" Her eyes opened slowly. "You're still here," she said softly. He smiled. "Where else would I go?" "You could run," she said, sitting up. "You could find a way back to your world before it's too late." He shook his head. "I didn't come here to run." Her voice trembled slightly. "You don't understand, Ethan. If they catch us, they won't just kill you. They'll make you suffer because of me." He reached for her hand gently, his fingers warm against her cold skin. "Then let them try. I won't let them take you alone." Her eyes softened, and for the first time a tear escaped down her cheek. She turned away quickly, embarrassed. "You shouldn't say such things," she whispered. "You'll make me believe you mean them." Ethan smiled sadly. "I already do." The queen's breath caught. For a moment she forgot her crown, her power, her curse. Everything. She looked at him not as a ruler, not as a being feared across the stars, but as a woman who had finally been seen. Then, before she could reply, a distant sound shattered the silence, the metallic echo of boots on stone. Soldiers. Ariana stood instantly, her power flickering to life, her red eyes glowing brighter. "They found us," she whispered. Ethan grabbed his small weapon, though it looked useless beside her magic. "Then we fight together." "No," she said quickly, her tone sharp. "If they capture me, they'll spare you." "They only want me," he shook his head. "And leave you to die?" Never. The air around them began to tremble. The sound of wings filled the sky, dark, shadowy creatures used by the council for tracking. Their screeches echoed through the forest. Ariana turned to Ethan, her voice trembling now. "Listen to me. Go east and there's a portal hidden in the ruins. It will take you far from here." He looked at her, his heart breaking. "You're asking me to leave you?" She stepped closer, her hand cupping his face gently. "You've already done more for me than anyone ever has. If you stay, they'll kill you. Please, Ethan, live for me." He took her hand and pressed it to his heart. "You think I can live in a world without you?" Her eyes glowed, her power rising with her emotions. The red light shimmered around them both. "Don't say that. I cannot lose you." But before she could finish, a voice shouted from the trees. "There they are!" A flash of light tore through the air. Energy bolts struck the ground near them, exploding in bursts of flame. Ariana shielded Ethan with her body, her power creating a glowing barrier of crimson light. The blast hit her shoulder and she cried out in pain. Ethan caught her as she fell, holding her tightly. "Ariana!" he shouted. She forced herself to stand, her eyes blazing with fury. "Go now!" But Ethan refused. He looked straight at her, his voice fierce and trembling. "No more running. I made my choice." And before she could stop him, he turned toward the soldiers, humans and aliens alike, and raised his weapon. The queen's eyes widened. She felt the air grow heavy as her heart pounded painfully inside her chest. Ethan fired once, twice, buying her seconds, not safety. The soldiers moved in fast, surrounding him. Ariana screamed his name, her voice shaking the forest itself. Her power exploded outward, a storm of red energy that sent soldiers flying in every direction. The ground cracked beneath her feet. When the dust settled, she was standing in the center of the battlefield, her eyes glowing like fire, her power radiating like the sun. Ethan, wounded but alive, stood at her side. The soldiers hesitated. Even Kale, who had led them, lowered his weapon for a moment. "My queen, please stop," he said. You'll destroy everything. Her voice broke as she whispered, Then let everything burn before I lose him. The soldiers retreated in fear, leaving only Kyle, who stared at her in sorrow. You've chosen your human, he said quietly. But love will cost you your throne. Ariana's hand trembled as she reached for Ethan's. Then let the throne fall. And as the soldiers vanished into the night, the queen and the human stood hand in hand, surrounded by fire and moonlight, two souls from different worlds, bound by something stronger than power or prophecy. But high above, in the shining halls of the palace, the council watched through their crystal mirrors. Their leader turned to the others and said, his voice like steel, Prepare the punishment. The queen's love will end, even if we must end her heart to do it. The red moons hung low in the sky, casting a blood-like glow over the land of Alaris. Smoke still drifted from the battlefield where the queen had unleashed her power. The forest was quiet again. Too quiet. Ariana stood beside Ethan, her golden hair tangled, her gown torn, her eyes still glowing faintly from the storm of energy she had released. The silence after battle always felt heavier than war itself. She turned to Ethan, brushing her fingers against his cheek. You're hurt, she whispered. He smiled weakly. You should see the other guys. Despite everything, she laughed softly, a sound rare and fragile like a melody from another world. For a brief moment, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could escape. But fate had other plans. Without warning, the air shimmered, a pulse of dark energy spreading through the forest. The ground beneath them cracked, and from the shadows the council's guardians appeared, tall, cloaked figures with crystal spears and hollow eyes. They moved like ghosts, silent and deadly. Ariana stepped in front of Ethan, her power rising instantly. Stay behind me, she said firmly. The leader of the guardians spoke, his voice echoing like thunder. Ariana of Alaris, you have broken the sacred law. You have chosen a human. The council demands your surrender. Ariana's red eyes flared. Tell the council, she said coldly, that their queen does not kneel. The air exploded with light. The battle began. Bolts of energy flew across the forest, tearing through trees and stone. Ariana moved like lightning, her power bursting from her hands, crimson and gold. The guardians were powerful, their magic ancient and binding, but her rage made her unstoppable. She struck one down with a wave of her hand, another with a surge of fire. The forest burned red, the sky screaming with thunder. Ethan tried to help, firing at the shadows, but they were too fast. One guardian appeared behind him and struck. A flash of light, a burst of power, and Ethan fell to the ground, motionless. Ariana froze. The world stopped spinning. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but silence. Then her scream tore through the air. The ground shook violently as her power erupted, wild, uncontrolled, pure rage. The guardians were thrown back like leaves in a storm. Trees burst into flames, the sky itself darkened. Her eyes turned from red to blazing white as tears ran down her face, glowing like liquid fire. No one touches him, she cried, her voice echoing for miles. With a single motion, she unleashed a storm of energy that shattered the earth. The guardians disintegrated into dust, their screams fading into the wind. When the storm finally calmed, she dropped to her knees beside Ethan, trembling. Ethan, please, she whispered, her hands shaking as she touched his face. Open your eyes, he stirred weakly, his voice barely audible. You're glowing again. She let out a shaky laugh through her tears. You foolish human. You scared me, he smiled faintly. You look beautiful when you're angry. Her lips quivered between laughter and tears. Don't make me laugh now. But their moment of peace was short-lived. From above, a voice filled the sky, cold and powerful. Ariana. She looked up to see a massive projection of the High Council's leader, floating like a ghost above the flames. His golden eyes glowed with judgment. You have broken every sacred bond, he said. You have killed your own guardians. The punishment for this betrayal is death. Ariana stood slowly, holding Ethan close to her. You call this betrayal? You call love a crime? You loved the wrong kind, the voice thundered. And now, you will lose him. Forever. Before she could react, a beam of golden light shot from the sky, striking Ethan in the chest. He gasped, his body glowing painfully as the light lifted him from her arms. No! She screamed, reaching for him, but the magic held her back. Ethan's body began to fade as if turning to light itself. "Ariana," he whispered, his voice breaking. "No matter what happens, don't let them change you." And then he was gone, the light vanished. Silence fell. Ariana dropped to the ground, her hands clawing at the empty air where he had been. Her scream echoed through the ruined forest, a sound so full of pain that even the stars seemed to tremble. Tears streamed down her face, glowing faintly red. Her power flared, shaking the very core of Alaris. The council's voice faded into the wind. "The human is no more. The queen will remember her place," but Ariana didn't move. She didn't speak. She just knelt there, broken and burning inside. The one soul who had dared to love her, gone before her eyes. Then slowly her expression changed. The pain didn't fade. It turned into something sharper, colder, rage. She rose to her feet, her hair floating around her, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. The ground cracked under her as her voice filled the air, low and deadly. "They took everything from me." Her power rippled across the land, shaking the mountains in the distance. "Then I will take everything from them." And as lightning flashed across the blood-red sky, the alien vampire queen walked toward the burning horizon. Her heart shattered, her love stolen, her vengeance awakened. The world of Alaris would soon learn what it meant to break the heart of a queen. The red moons hung higher that night, casting their haunting glow across the land of Alaris. The wind carried whispers of fear, for the people knew their queen had changed. In the ruins of the forest, Queen Ariana stood like a flame among ashes. Her gown was torn, her crown cracked, but her eyes burned brighter than ever before. The earth beneath her feet pulsed with her fury. Her heart, once full of sorrow, was now consumed by vengeance. The council had taken everything from her: her throne, her peace, and the one soul who had ever seen her as more than a ruler, Ethan. She raised her hand slowly, and a deep red light filled the sky. Her voice echoed through every mountain and every palace on Alaris. "Hear me, people of Alaris. Your queen has been betrayed by her own council. They call it justice, I call it treason. They stole the only heart I ever had. Now I will take theirs." The energy from her words spread through the air like fire. Across the cities, her soldiers felt her rage and bowed to her power. Some whispered in fear. Others cheered, ready to follow her into war. In the great crystal tower, the council watched through their mirrors, their faces pale. "She has declared war," one whispered. The elder's voice trembled with anger. "Let her. She cannot win against the ancient laws." But deep down, even the council could feel it. The balance of power was shifting. Ariana's strength was growing beyond what they had ever imagined. Meanwhile, in the dark chambers beneath the palace, Kale, once her loyal guard, knelt before the council's prison master. His eyes were filled with conflict. "You promised she wouldn't be harmed," he said quietly. "She brought this upon herself," the master hissed. "And the human, his soul is sealed within the celestial prison. His body is gone, but his essence still lives." Kale's eyes widened. "Still lives?" The master smirked. "Trapped between worlds. He cannot return unless the queen breaks the seal, which would destroy her." Kale turned away, his heart heavy. He knew what he had to do. That night, as the skies rumbled with Ariana's wrath, Kale stole into the shadows. He had betrayed her once, he would not do it again. Back in the war camp, Ariana stood before her army. 1,000 warriors cloaked in crimson armor, their blades glowing with power. The air shimmered with energy as she raised her sword high. "We fight not for a crown," she shouted, her voice echoing through the battlefield, "but for freedom, for truth, for the right to love without fear." The army roared in answer. The ground trembled beneath their feet, but when the roar faded, Ariana's gaze turned toward the stars. Her voice lowered, almost a whisper. "And for you, Ethan." As the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, she led her army forward, straight toward the palace that once belonged to her. The sky darkened. The air cracked with power. Lightning danced across the clouds as her soldiers clashed with the council's guards. Ariana moved through the battlefield like a storm, her blade glowing, her power bursting with fury. Every strike she made was for Ethan. Every breath she took was filled with pain and purpose. The palace gates fell, crashing into dust. The queen walked through the smoke, her gown glowing faintly gold now, her magic changing, evolving. She looked unstoppable, but inside, hidden behind walls of crystal and magic, Ethan's spirit stirred. His voice was faint, calling her name across the veil between worlds. Ariana. She froze mid-step. Her heart skipped. She could feel him. His soul, alive. Faint, but real. Her eyes widened. Ethan? She whispered, and then she heard it again, his voice soft but full of warmth. Don't stop. I'm still here. Tears filled her eyes. The fury in her chest turned into something new. Determination. The council appeared before her, 12 figures glowing in golden light. You bring destruction upon your people, the elder said. Your love has doomed this world. Ariana stepped forward, her voice trembling but powerful. No. My love will save it. With a single motion, she thrust her sword into the ground. The palace floor shattered, releasing a wave of crimson light that shattered the council's illusions. For the first time in centuries, the elders looked afraid. Her power surged, raw and divine. She was no longer just a queen. She was becoming something greater, the prophecy itself. The princess will choose one not of our kind, one elder whispered in horror, and the stars will tremble. The light grew brighter, filling the hall. Ariana's heart pounded. Ethan's voice echoed one last time. Find me, Ariana. Follow the light. And before the palace could collapse around her, the red light from her hands opened a portal, glowing, swirling, leading somewhere beyond the stars. Her soldiers called out for her to stop, but she didn't hesitate. She looked up one last time at the world she ruled, and then stepped into the portal, vanishing into the unknown. Behind her, Ilaris shook as the sky cracked with thunder. The prophecy had begun. The world faded into light. When Ariana opened her eyes, she was no longer on Ilaris. She stood on a vast plain made of shimmering glass. Above her, the sky was endless, stars swirling like rivers of gold. Time felt still, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Her gown floated around her like smoke, glowing faintly crimson. Every step echoed softly, and her voice sounded small in the silence. Ethan, she whispered. Where are you? Only her echo replied. For the first time since she entered the portal, fear crept into her chest. This place didn't feel alive. It felt like a dream, or the space between dreams. Then faintly, she heard it. A heartbeat. Slow, steady, familiar. Her eyes widened as she turned toward the sound. Far in the distance, she saw him, Ethan, standing on the edge of a glowing bridge of light, looking just as he had before, his eyes full of warmth and sorrow. Ariana ran toward him, her bare feet gliding across the glass. When she reached him, she stopped, afraid to touch him, afraid he'd vanish like smoke. He smiled softly. You came, her voice broke. You think I'd let them keep you? He laughed quietly. You always were too stubborn for a queen. She reached out, her hand trembling, and this time, when her fingers touched his, she felt warmth. Real warmth, her breath caught. You're alive. Half alive, he said gently. The council bound my soul between worlds. I can't return to Ilaris. Not unless you give up your power. Her eyes filled with tears. If that's the price, then I'll pay it. He shook his head. No, if you do that, your world will fall into chaos. You'll die, Ariana. She looked up at him, eyes shining. Then let it. What's a world without you in it? He took her face in his hands, his touch light as starlight. A world that still needs its queen. You don't understand, and the prophecy wasn't a curse. It was a choice, her brow furrowed. A choice? Ethan nodded slowly. It said, the princess will choose one not of our kind, and the stars will tremble. You were never meant to destroy the worlds, Ariana. You were meant to unite them. She blinked in confusion. Unite? He smiled. Your love broke the walls between our worlds. That's why I'm here. That's why this realm exists. It's the bridge between life and death, between human and alien, between heart and destiny. Ariana's tears fell freely now, glowing as they hit the glass beneath her. Then what do I have to do? Let go of vengeance, Ethan said softly. You've already proven your strength. Now prove your heart. She took a deep breath. The air shimmered with power as she stepped closer, pressing her forehead against his. Then we end this, and together. A blinding light surrounded them. Their hands intertwined, and the energy of both worlds flowed through them. Her red fire, his white light. The sky rippled. Stars shifted. The universe trembled. From the ruins of Alaris, people looked up as the dark clouds split apart. Golden light rained down upon their cities. The earth healed, the rivers glowed, and for the first time in centuries the planet felt alive. In the palace, the council's crystal mirrors shattered. The elder fell to his knees as the voice of the prophecy filled the air. Love was never the weakness of the queen. It was the key that awakened the stars. The light reached every corner of the world, and then silence. When Ariana opened her eyes again, she was back in her palace. The golden walls were repaired, the sky above her clear and bright. But something was different. She wasn't alone. Ethan stood beside her, alive, real, and smiling. She reached for him, afraid it was another dream, but his hand closed around hers firmly. "How?" she whispered. "The prophecy completed," he said softly. Two hearts became one, and the curse broke. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but this time they weren't from pain. "Ethan," she breathed, and before he could reply, she kissed him. Slow, deep, and full of every promise they'd never been allowed to keep. Outside, the bells of Alaris rang, not for war, but for peace. The queen had returned. The curse had ended. And from that day, every creature, alien or human, spoke of the queen who defied the stars for love. Ariana and Ethan ruled together, not as legend and mortal, but as two souls who proved that even in the coldest darkness, love could create light strong enough to move the heavens. The prophecy's final words were carved into the palace gates. When hearts of different worlds beat as one, even the stars will bow. And as the red moons rose that night, the alien vampire queen stood on her balcony, Ethan's hand in hers, smiling softly at the horizon. For the first time in forever, she wasn't alone.